Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture. I have with me the creator of the independent comic Hollowed, Casey Bowker. So, welcome.
Hey, thank you very much for having me today.
Yeah, I am super excited. This is my second interview of the day so far. I promise everybody there's not going to be a third. There's not going to be a third unless I get a text message that somebody wants a third. And that's a whole different discussion. But anyhow, I think the perfect place to start here is what is the basic premise of Hollowed? Because it's fascinating and it's got a lot of stuff going on, for lack of a better word.
It has everything but the kitchen sink in Hollow.
Yeah, Starsky and Hutch would be proud.
Yeah. I I created this screenplay back when I went to college, a very long time ago. And the script just kind of sat around. It was something I thought at the time, you know what, this would be good on Sci-Fi Channel. And I just never really did anything with it. And then I, would go back to it every year or so and kind of like update it so it didn't sound so early 2000s and like then just kind of kept working on it. But when I met my artist, Darius Johnson, at a Comic Con, I loved his artwork and I was like, hey man, have you ever done a comic book before? And he said, yeah, he has. And I go, well, I have this script and it's a movie script, but I think I could turn it into a comic. And it's about I went to University of Buffalo in Buffalo, New York, and so the whole comic takes place there, and it's about these two detectives who hunt down a serial killer that hollows out its victims. So Darius is also from Buffalo. He wanted to draw it, and it's been going good ever since.
So, we're going to talk about the story in a second, but I'm very curious because one of the things is movies are very different than comics in how they're written and how they are presented and what control are given to the reader versus the watcher. And so, what was that like transforming it from a movie, which allows you to do certain things that a comic doesn't allow you to do, and vice versa?
Yeah, so to be quite honest with you, as far as like anything that's written down, I can see it in a comic. You know what I mean? Like as the story progresses, it gets more and more crazy, and I throw a lot more visuals at the reader. And at least in the comic book form, I mean, you can do anything you want. We got superheroes and all that kind of stuff, so you can really do whatever you want that way. The hardest thing was the translation between breaking up the script into comic book pages and specifically comic book panels. That has been, it's not as much of a struggle now, but when I actually started, like, you take I think it's like a 90 page, 100-page script, and I'm chopping it up into individual comics. That has been like, ooh, where's a cliffhanger moment? And then I got to tweak the script because, a movie, there's cliffhanger moments, but not really. It's not like a television show. It's usually like you get A, B, and C acts, and then it's done. So I'm adding in like little like moments of like extra tension, so that when it ends in the comic, it's like, oh, what's gonna happen next? I got to read that next issue, and there you go. So that's been the hardest part. Is I didn't know how to do like panels, and I read a lot of other comic book writers, and there doesn't seem to be an exact format. Different writers write different ways.
Yeah, every person has one. You know, Denny O'Neil, who I know has a style. Tom DeFalco has a style.
Yeah.
Peter David, who I'm not a fan of per se, has a very
Okay.
different style,
Yeah.
and the list goes on and on. And I could keep going with names, but all three of them, and Mark Waid, we could throw in there, also has a fourth different style. And there's a big debate that's actually going on in comics right now of what style is the best style and what book is the best book to learn from. So
Hmm.
I could imagine that writing and transforming, but I think we should talk about the story, because I think once we talk about the story, people will be like, "Oh, I get it now. Why this is a little bit interesting and hard to sort of write and break up." And so I'm gonna give a little bit more detail.
Sure.
So clearly, we have a team of two cops
Yep.
tracking down a serial killer that is going pretty much across parts of Canada and parts of the US. And the end game for this criminal, or supposed criminals, if we will, is somewhere in Buffalo.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious where the idea for serial killers came out, because this serial killer is hollowing out their victims' bodies. They've so far only targeted males, and the
Yep.
males have a smile, and they're hollowing out the body with acid skillfully, which is a
Yeah.
very different taste and, I guess, position and way to do it that necessarily hasn't been done yet in the serial, and it's a nice twist to it.
Thank you. I'm glad that you've picked up on all that. um, yeah, so when I started writing, I wanted it. Okay, so one of my favorite movies ever. I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can see behind me, is From Dusk Till Dawn. And one of the things I really love about From Dusk Till Dawn, which is written by Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez, is that it starts off like a gangster movie, and then there's the point when they go into the bar, and then all of a sudden vampires, and they're not alluded to, there's no mention, there's no hints at all of a sudden there's vampires. And so this comic I started writing with the intention for it to feel like Seven, and then there is a very clear twist coming where I hope the readers, I have put in some clues, but overall it's kind of like, oh, why did this happen? What is going on here? And so the serial killer thing, it definitely plays a part into it, but once the twist happens, I think then some of those pieces that I've been laying in there will make more sense.
Yeah, and to even go further off of that, it's very interesting. And then I mentioned Starsky and Hutch
Yeah.
at the beginning, because that's kind of the relationship
Yeah.
between these two cops. And I think it's Vasquez and Tyler
Yeah.
is
Yep.
the two cops, and I think it's very interesting that they have a love hate. Let's catch this guy. Both have somewhat issues with him and what he's doing, and they don't really know the full extent of what they're getting into, which is sort of still similar like Starsky and Hutch.
Yeah.
Not the great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, these two guys, seemingly from very different backgrounds. Vasquez is very straight laced by the book, whereas Tyler plays things fast and loose. Doesn't really care how he gets it done as long as the job gets done, sort of thing. And those two guys are like oil and water, which some of my favorite movies, like the Lethal Weapons and buddy comedies, 48 Hours, like that kind of stuff. I like to see those kind of relationships, bad boys. So I wanted to write that myself when I picked these two characters out.
And this sort of evolves into something much, much bigger.
Yeah.
And we kind of got to spoil a little bit of it, because the first issue doesn't really give much of a bite to this comic. And then in the second issue, we start finding out a lot more about this oil and what a relationship and how it sort of goes against this killer and what this killer is associated with, which is what I like to call a company and an entire organization. And he has a name, and it's sort of getting more interesting from that point. And this thing is starts out very much narrow and straight laced, and definitely expands outward and becomes a much bigger thing and entity. And I guess the analogy I would use is that it's almost like a funnel. where it's a reverse funnel where we enter at a very low position. Now we're into the thing. So if the funnel was upside down, everybody.
I hope you guys got that. Yeah, that was all my, intentions for this thing is that like I said, I really wanted this twist to happen and I wanted people not to see it coming and yeah, as far as like shadowy organizations, I don't know. I'm a huge Buffy fan and they always had like the Watchers and they were just like, what are they doing? What do they control? I like that idea. So yeah, as they're going and tracking down this serial killer, something more is operating. And how does that connect to the serial killer? That's what they don't quite know yet. We, the reader, get a little insight into this shadowy organization, but the detectives don't, and they don't quite know what they're about to open up.
And to dive into that, also, one of the things that is fascinating is this. It does feel like a movie when it's being read. It definitely does not feel like a comic, which is a nice touch because it feels like you're almost witnessing it and you're seeing this relationship and you're getting that authentic feel that it's more written like a movie script, to be honest, because we're introduced to these bad guys and then the next thing that's going to happen in issue 3 with a certain person in this organization, because I don't want to ruin too much, but that's almost like a cliffhanger thing, and it's almost like a next level type thing. And going back to ABC, A, B, and C act, we're getting that feel too. So what is that like? Because that's the pacing of this book in many ways.
Yeah, that's again, it was a little bit hard because when I started out, I didn't know how to write a comic book script. I've never written a comic at all, and I've never seen anything that I've written really come to life in that way, other than like crappy student films. So when I first worked with my artist Darius, he I wrote every panel. So I said I want close up of his face here, and I want this, and and I gave him visual pictures for almost every panel. So like in the first issue, this bad guy does this thing where he kicks a can at Tyler's face. And I actually like described it and then I showed like another example in another comic exactly how I wanted it drawn. Or at least, Darius can take that idea. So in issue 2, what was really cool is that he was like, you just give me the pages and I'll come up with the panels. And we've gotten to a point now where we really like, I have an idea in my head. I'll give him like sort of a clue and he just puts it out there and it's great. So even the characters when I first saw them were exactly how I imagined them when I wrote them. So he's done a fantastic job with bringing my visual sense, though it's written on the page, to life. So I have to give him all the credit as far as how it's been presented.
And what is that like to really have an artist? Because you met this artist at a Comic Con,
Yeah,
and to really be able to work and be on the same wavelength, because that does change the game on
yeah,
so many levels, and have somebody who understands the vision and understands how to bring something to life. What is that like? Because you have this thing, and it's clearly a long project, and it's very much your baby. If you
it
started this
is.
thing down in 2000, and then it took 10 years or more to get it published,
Yeah.
what is that like to kind of have that trust and have that thing? Because it must make you feel comfortable to some degree.
It does. What's really different? So for Darius himself, he works on his own comics, and he told me that when he does his comics, he actually draws everything and then puts in the writing, which I've actually never heard of before. He knows where he wants to go, but he doesn't have it all written out. Whereas for me, I write and I write a lot, and then I give it to him and he just has to like kind of put it together. And there may be some tweaks, but it may be tweaks from that he has for me too, where he's like, "Hey, I really think that Tyler should be doing this in this scene, or in this panel, I want to show it like this." And then I go, "Okay." And so far, we've both never had any issues. There's been no headbutting. It's been very much like, "Okay, let's see." And then like he'll go and do some weird things too, like he's done a couple variant covers, for the comics, and they're always super cool and things that I'm just like, oh, okay, sure, like let's go with that. So, like the issue 3 that's coming out, I can say this because it's definitely not a spoiler. I wanted a cover that literally has nothing to do with the comic. And even the cover for issue 1, he came up with that. It's like the 3 main characters going out of a building that's exploding and they're shooting. This does not happen in any of the comics. No issues, not the script, not even like a footnote anywhere. And he just came up with it. And I was like, right on, man. Like, do that. So for the 3rd issue, I actually wanted I want to set at a bar. The bar is going to play a actual role in the comic, but I want all the characters to be different patrons at a bar. And I want, like, it's just going to be a weird and fun cover that you don't ever see like in a comic. But like, Vasquez is going to be behind the bar as a bartender. Tyler's going to be like playing darts. Like the chief is going to be doing karaoke. But and he just goes, okay, like that's super weird, but let's do it. Let's see what this looks like. So we have a lot of fun with it.
And what is that like to just throw ideas out there and see what sticks? Because in many ways, with those variant covers, that's kind of what it is. And I like when comics do things like that and tell an alternate story and kind of throw a little bit of a red herring, if you will, into the mixture for everybody to say, oh, how does this relate? Because covers do help sell books. And so it's nice
Yes.
to have a red herring in there and have something that's just out of the blue and abnormal, for lack of a better word. Because I love when covers get weird.
I do too. I tend to go towards the weird ones. I tend to go towards the ones that they might not absolutely have anything to do with it. I know, like, Batman did his like 1,000, Detective Comics did 1,000 issues, and like there was some weird ones in there. I think Jock had like a really weird one, and like Alex Ross is pretty classic. But I bought a bunch because it was like I'm seeing Batman, but I'm never seeing what he would do in a comic, and I thought that was really neat. So I know for issue 2, I'm trying to think of what I asked for the visual. I think you know what it was. It was a play off of one of the issues of Deadly Class. I can't remember for the life of me who does the artwork right now. But it's so like visually stunning, those covers. And those covers don't always have to do with the comic. A lot of them do, but some of them don't. And I said, let's use this because there is a dichotomy between all 4 of our good guys and bad guys, and I thought that that was a really good way. So issue 2, I was quite proud of the cover that he came up with.
And to back out the cover work, because this is the final question I'm going to ask about the story. So issues 1 and 2 are done. And
Yep.
we're going to jump to the Kickstarter and some other stuff around the Kickstarter in a second here. But what can fans expect in issues 1 and 2, as well as going into issue 3, without ruining too much? And I don't think we ruined too much so far.
No, no, I haven't. We didn't give any specific story beats, so I will say this. So a lot of people ask me, "Is it ongoing? Is it story?" Blah blah. That's one of the number one things that get asked at conventions. I've mapped it out to 8 issues. So this movie is 8 issues of a comic, and Darius and I are committed to each other. To go through those 8 issues. We really love it. We have fantastic fans. Like on the Kickstarter, we'll talk about it more, but it's great. But as far as like what you're seeing is, okay, who is the serial killer? We're gonna learn more about that. How does it connect to the shadowy organization? And how do these 2 detectives from different places in the country who hate each other and have oil and water, how are they connected? Because they are, and that is all I will say.
And why in Buffalo is a question.
It's because I went to school there, and you know what I mean? Like, so I'm from the area, and at the
Oh, I
time,
mean,
like,
we're gonna find out why.
oh, why we're gonna, yes, sorry, yes, we'll also find out why we're in Buffalo. Yeah, not just the chicken wings. That's why.
Because just to give a quick position on that, there's a very cool map scene that maps out all the stuff, and Buffalo's at the center of it.
Yeah,
So that's kind of just funny, and clearly it has something to do with it, and it has something
yes,
to do with
yeah.
the story. But I don't want to ruin anything. I could take a stab at it, but I'll leave everybody's imagination to go read the book.
I
So,
appreciate that.
but now I want to talk about kind of the Kickstarter and what's going on with that because there's some cool stuff that's going on. And one of the things that I like, and I had somebody who did something sort of similar, but also you guys did it differently, and that's the music aspect that's associated with this. And you have two bands that are sort of involved in this on of Mars, the
Yep,
band that did I think
yep,
original soundtrack for the first issue, and
they
then
did.
Max
Yep,
Overdrive 1986 did
yep,
stuff for the second, and so that's kind of cool to
yeah.
incorporate music and have that, and I guess have an expansion to some degree to it.
Yeah, so that was something that at the time when we were coming up with Hollowed, no one had done that before. It's since come out a few different times. I know Image had a comic called The Weatherman that did that, and I was like, okay, great. But yeah, it's something where it doesn't take super long to read a comic, and I think the soundtrack is maybe 20 minutes, so about the time that it might take you to read through it. And we wanted that extra experience that like I said, at the time that we released the first issue, nobody else was doing this. And I thought it was just a really cool, at least I had never seen, a really cool idea to have a different reward tier. And, we found these magical tapes of Mars and kind of enhanced them a little bit to 2018's technology. And we got lucky. So we put that music to the comic, which has been good.
And not to disparage of Mars or even Max Overdrive in 1986, but those bands aren't huge bands, but they do add a layer of legitimacy to some degree because it is music out there and people or some people like them, and then it also adds, it adds that layer because now it adds a layer of seriousness and saying, hey, this is professional and this is in that realm, and that this isn't just, kind of a low indie comic for lack of a better word. So, and I say that because it's sort of the blunt truth that sometimes happens because indie
Oh yeah.
comics have changed and they've gotten a lot better, but they do have a stigma attached to them. And this kind of helps with that a little bit. So, what is that like to have a layer of legitimacy added in and built in and have a cool reward that sort of does that to some degree?
That's really fun because typically if we have a table at a con, I'll play the music too. And a lot of people are like, okay, tell me about your comic and blah, blah, blah. And then we're like, oh, have you noticed this music too? Going along with it. So we actually did, good with that tier. And it's out there on Bandcamp and stuff and people download it. So it's, it's different, it's a different thing when people also comment on the music too and say, hey, this track fit this scene that I was reading. Like there's one that's called Raining, and there's a big rain scene in the first issue, and there's we kind of wanted to match up the tracks to about the pace of which you were reading. So that was another layer of going into the project that was a lot of fun.
And this kind of brings us into the Kickstarter. And there's what's interesting about your Kickstarter is the comics are done. The first two issues are done. And this has a bunch of rewards. And one of the things that I viewed as, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is almost like a pre-order form to get it printed.
That's it. Yeah. So I'll tell you, because it's an indie comic and I don't expect to be Todd McFarlane or anything, even though he deserves it. He worked his ass off. But the way that I've done it is, the first issue pretty much came out of pocket, and then I used the Kickstarter to pay myself back. And then whatever extra money that I had, I rolled into issue two. And then issue two, Darius and I, after the first issue, we did a bunch of cons together. And every piece of money, I just said, here you go, bud. Keep going on the next issue. And then we actually had a whole schedule for this summer of cons.
So
And then this hit. So,
Let's table that because
uh,
one of the things that I've been noticing on Kickstarter, so we're gonna get to the con stuff,
yeah,
trust
yeah,
me.
sure.
But one of the things that I've been noticing on Kickstarter, and I had Steve Tanner and a few other people
Yeah.
on a few weeks ago, and they were saying this is that they use it as a pre-order form, and that's a relatively new thing in Kickstarter.
Yes.
And I'm not saying I'm a Kickstarter expert. I just supported my second Kickstarter, and I had a bad experience on it for my first one. But person didn't do it as a pre-order. It was a nightmare, but I digress. But this is relatively new in the last year or so. So, and I think it's a better way how to do it, to be honest, because I think it makes so much more sense to have the actual thing done and then have it, so it can be printed. So, I guess, do you think that's the future of Kickstarter and where that's going? Because I think that's so interesting, that position versus the other way to do it, which is, hey, let's go raise a bunch of money, see if there's interest, and then take 3 years to get the project out.
That's the issue, right? And I've backed a lot of Kickstarters, and I know one I backed literally 5 years ago or 6 years ago, a video game, and it just came out last year. You know what I mean? It was almost like, here's your seed money, and hopefully this pays. You feel like an investor, and you hope that you get back that investment. This is, I want this comic, I'm paying for this comic, and I'll get it. You know what I mean? Like I feel better about it that way, especially when it is indie, because like, no offense to myself and the other indie creators, but like, if I were to go and have maybe like a few pages done, and some people do it, and that's fine, but like, if they had a few pages done and then I'm using this money to pay the artist the rest to actually finish it, I don't know when, maybe Christmas time, you know what I mean? Like, that they might get the comic if they're lucky. So I like this way. I feel more comfortable knowing that it's done, and I'm really just paying for printing and paying for these people to get the comic, and then also to pay Darius to start on issue three. Because for me, like you mentioned at the top of this thing, is like, it feels like my baby, and I also feel like I owe it to the fans. So I want to keep giving them hollowed comics.
And then also another trend that I'm noticing on Kickstarter, and I spend a lot of time browsing, is that a lot of people who are doing the pre-order style are also setting extremely low bars. And they're setting it so that, and from a psychology standpoint, and then I'm this way, that once a project gets funded, I want to be more involved in that project because I now know what's going on. I'll tell a really quick story. Curse,
Yeah.
the omnibus just got funded. It got funded in like 3 hours, I think. And then it's been funded a few times around. And when it hit that 25,000 mark, I actually jumped in really quickly because I felt way more comfortable. And it's almost like a
Yep.
placebo effect. And I
Yep.
think your bar is what, 350, $400
Yep.
around there. So it's very low. And it's this idea that that's a very reachable goal. And so
That's it.
I'm just
Yeah.
curious that entire thing and getting the printing done, and if that was even a factor in that entire placebo effect. So that's a new trend as well on Kickstarter.
That is absolutely the reason why. Yeah, because I'm the same way. Like, if I'm into a project and it's close, then I feel like I'm going to push them over. If it's like they've got 48 hours left and they still are at 50%, then I'm like, I don't want to give you. Or even at the very beginning, I usually don't. The only way that I'll do it is if it's a project that either they've already been funded before, like the creator, or it's something I'm like so excited about that maybe they might do like a early bird. We're doing one for Hollowed. Like if you order within the first couple days, then it's cheaper for like a pack that has like issues 1 and 2 and like a bunch of digital stuff and stickers. So like, and I think that's cool to give people. But yeah, I think that once it's kind of weird. Like I gave money to McFarlane for Spawn for the toy, but it was almost like he had reached 1 million and then he reached 2 million, and then you almost feel like, how far can this go? Like I want to give money just to see how this goes. Like so, which is hey, good for McFarlane. So I've got stretch goals in mind, and I can offer more things to people if it gets funded, and I think that's always really fun too. It's like, well, you unlocked a new person or whatever.
That's what's going on with curse words because it's now at like over $85,000 on a
Yeah, yeah.
$25,000 thing, and it's probably going to reach 100,000 easy, and it's
Oh,
worth
I'm
every penny.
absolutely. I ordered that thing. I mean, those two guys was it Lemire and Kent, right?
No,
Wait,
it's Ryan Brown and Charles Soule.
that curse words. Oh, I know what you're talking about now. I will also give all my money to Charles Soule. I love all the stuff he does for Star Wars and
But
Marvel in general.
but speaking about stretch goals and even rewards, because let's talk about your Kickstarter. So what is being offered? Because it's not even that expensive to get the first two comics. It's not an expensive reward.
No, I mean you can get the first two comics. I wrote another comic book last year called In Fairy. That's going to be an extra reward. The soundtrack, of course, T-shirts, stickers. You can get your face in the comic. I got a lot of those last time. The first go around was
So
I didn't expect
what
it.
if somebody wants a physical copy? Let's start there.
Yeah.
Of the first two issues. What is that reward level?
So the first two, what is that? Like $10, I
10 or
think.
15 from what I saw.
I don't even know if it's 15. It's it might be $12 to get both the first two issues. And the way that I figure it is like I know how much it costs to print it. I know how much it costs to ship it relatively. You can who knows what it's going to be like nowadays, but um I feel bad and wrong asking people to pay too much more than they would be able to pay if they go into a comic book shop.
I agree. I hate Kickstarters that charge so with this Kickstarter, and I'm not going to name
Yeah,
who it is. The book
yeah,
is $21 on
yeah,
MidtownComics.com. The
yeah,
reward was 60.
yeah,
That's and I didn't get any bonuses or anything like that because orders were canceled and it took 2 years.
yeah,
So all those stretch goals were out, and I don't think this person is ever going to do a Kickstarter again because I think they've lost all credibility.
yeah.
So, and I think that the fact that you keep your rewards very low makes it easier to go and get that comic, and it's almost like anybody who wants this book and is a fan of this can afford it.
Yeah. I mean, like, I could charge $10 for an issue, and I feel like that's the most that I'd ever charge. I'm not going to, I'm not doing it, but I'm just saying, like, I feel like even for me, $10 would be the limit. I saw one that was like $20, and I think it was maybe a 48 issue or 48 page comic, and I was like, I can't, I can't justify that. Like, if it's a hardcover, and you're giving me like 120 pages and like okay, then yeah, sure, $40 seems reasonable. But like the other thing about it is if you're doing Kickstarter, you're supporting the person because whoever's on the Kickstarter, you're supporting that artist. And I do agree with paying a little bit more for that. But I also think like I'm offering like a couple of prints, like postcards and like variant covers. You're not getting them anyplace else. You're not walking into the comic book shop to get these. Like they are only on Kickstarter, or if you saw me at a con, but then I still have that more personal interaction with you. I've met you. If you do the Kickstarter, I'm probably emailing you at least to say, hey, what's your t-shirt size or whatever. So I feel it's more personal too.
And to even go further beyond all this, when is the Kickstarter gonna be happening? Because is the Kickstarter live? Because I don't know if the Kickstarter is
No,
live.
no, it's not live yet. So
When
it's
is it
going to
coming?
be, yeah, yeah, it's going to be on Thursday, May 28th. So a little over a week.
And now I want to back out of Kickstarter for a few minutes because we mentioned something about the con world, and let's be realistic. And you come from sort of two segments of that, and so I'm curious, and I want to deal with them a little bit separately, but I'm sure
Sure.
they're going to cross over. So the first segment I want to deal with that is you said that you had a bunch of cons lined up. I would imagine that you do all right at cons with selling the book and
Yeah.
getting to meet people and just getting it even out there because I'm a strong believer that people need to be seen,
Yeah.
not heard. People
Yep.
need to be, it's great. I have a decent sized internet presence, but I need to be seen presenting a panel when I present, and people need to see my face. So how has COVID-19 affected you on that front? Because let's be realistic, it's like a torpedo has hit everything. And I think the biggest hit so far has been San Diego Comic Con, and that battleship has sunk.
Yeah. Wizard World seems to be finding their niche with doing these virtual
New York
cons,
Comic
and
Con just did
you
one
can
also.
meet the celebrities for some free, some at cost if you want to do like a live Q&A with like a celebrity. And I think that's actually not bad. It's actually cheaper than it would be at a con, and you spend more time with them because that's a cattle call. If you've ever done that, met a celebrity, it's just like you take your picture and they just push you along. So for that, I think it's kind of cool. And it also allows a lot of people who would never experience a Comic Con, either fear of going outside or money or location or whatever, to get that experience. Maybe they're still a huge geek, they just don't get to do it. So there is some benefits that way. But to your point, I love interacting with people in person and being able to have that one on one. um, Darius and I have flirted with the idea of doing our own like virtual con with like some of the local people in upstate New York, and we still might do that and see how that goes. And I think that might not be a bad idea, but it's a lot different than somebody. So this is my favorite thing, right? Saturday they come, I sell them hollowed, they go back to their house or their hotel room, they read it the next day. Hey man, read the comic last night, it was really good, and then what's happening next? And I can go, that's cool. Like I have that actual tangible, like not somebody on the internet typing, you know what I mean? It's literally someone who just I saw the day before saying, hey, I want to know what's happening next. Greatest feeling, you know? You put something out into the world and people accept it. Greatest feeling in the world. Absolutely. So that sucks.
And then the other side, and I must say that's awesome because that's great feedback. That must when people clap at a panel that I do, and then people say, "Hey, man, got a few minutes because I would love to hear more of what you have to say." It's
Yeah.
amazing when you have a full room of people of 250 people. It's fantastic, and then when people get rejected from your panel and you're not being paid and you do better than the paid guests and they hate you, it's amazing. It's happened to me, and it's amazing, and I love it. And all I'm doing is I'm just smiling like a cheeky little bastard. But anyhow, I digress right there. But because I know the feeling, but the other side I want to talk about is that you were a co-editor for, and I think you still are, for a pop culture website that does a lot of content that across the board, from my understanding.
Yeah.
I don't know if we could say their name, but
Yeah. Don't forget Atala.com. Please say it. It's my website.
please, no, 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 it's your website. I'm not going to say it. You say it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no. Yeah. Well, what's your question? Sorry, before I cut
So
off.
from the pop culture standpoint, and from a journalist standpoint, and from a person who runs your website, how has that been, seeing all these cons and seeing how this entire thing, and I guess the tower is crumbling temporarily with San Diego going down, and Emerald City Comic Con going down, and
Yeah.
even the comic industry is sort of shutting down for a while. I'm just curious from more of a not a creator standpoint, but a journalistic standpoint and a contributor standpoint, how you feel.
It's so we do a podcast too for Don't Forget Towel called Towelite Talk. And it's funny because there's been since March, there's been like a section that's pretty much like, well, these are the TV shows that are pushed back. These are the comics that are canceled. These are the movies that you won't be seeing this year. So it happens every week that we talk about it. So that sucks. I mean, the cool thing is that if you ever write or draw, you're pretty much an inside person to a degree. And this has been a blessing in some ways because other than the times where you feel the crushing fate of reality above you, like a lot of times I'm just writing. Like I'm still writing and I have more time because I'm not just distracted to go out and all that kind of stuff. So I'm sure a lot of these guys and gals out there are probably creating some pretty awesome stuff. We just will have to wait to see it. From a journalistic standpoint, yeah, sometimes it sucks, but luckily, people behind the scenes are still doing things. Like people are still getting hired to do roles for movies. You know, DC and Marvel. Well, DC for sure, and I think Image are like shipping out comics soon. You know what I mean? Because that was a whole thing with Diamond and all that. But you know, one of the coolest thing is like I'm a huge Valiant fan, and I'm a huge fan of the guys who left Valiant to create Bad Idea. And what they're doing is literally calling up comic book shops on the phone and saying, "Will you sell my comic? And how many do you want? Not we're going to give you 100 issues of X-Men #1, take it or leave it." Like they're literally saying, "Okay, you want 5, I'll give you 5." So I think that's the way that it's going to change for the comic book industry because I think like Diamond had such a stranglehold, and even the big two had such a stranglehold on these independent comic book shops that it can't be like that anymore. So I hope when we come out on the other side of it that it actually is better for these indie comic book shops to exist and to prosper, hopefully.
And even jumping off of that, how do you think the con world is going to change? Because clearly we cannot go the way we've been going. And there has to be changes on a lot of levels, from who is he selling at these cons to how they're run, how celebrity lines are run. I mean, just if for those who've never been, and I'm sure you have horror stories, but I waited in a Stan Lee line, and that thing wrapped around half of the con, and Austin
Right.
Con's a big convention, and you were in that middle of the. I mean, he was signing everything. It's not that's not the issue, and he wasn't going to leave until that line was done.
Right.
But at the same time, it was like a 3 hour wait if you were at the back of
Yeah.
the line, and
Yeah.
a lot of people. And my point that I'm trying to make is that that's a problem given what we got going on with COVID. So I'm just curious your thoughts on it.
I think that if I was a celebrity, I wouldn't want to go. And I read somebody today was talking about them being in like a plexiglass area so they won't get like coughed on or something. But like,
Such a
but then
turnoff. Such a turnoff. It's going to enrage fans.
correct,
It's going to piss off people, and it's
correct,
going to actually reduce the celebrity's economic position.
correct. And like, so I wouldn't want to go because of that. If I cared about my fans, I wouldn't want to go. If I was a fan, I don't want to go because it's too much. You know what I mean? Like it's too much of just
Control.
dealing with like people in that closed space. It's just so honestly, cons, concerts where they can't like space out people. I don't know how that's gonna look for a while. And
2020
you
was
know,
the earliest.
yeah,
The
yeah.
earliest, and I'm being generous when I say
That's
it.
being very generous. Yeah, because like so think about it, right? Like vaccine comes out, whatever, people take it. Some people will die from it. Some people won't take it. And then do you want to risk it? Do you want to stand next to that person? You know what I mean? So it's just like it's so mind blowing to think about it because it was such a short time ago that all this happened. But yeah, of course, I would love to interact with somebody face to face, even with a mask on. But then I have to think about the 5,000 other people that are going to be around me. And that's when I go, is it
No,
worth it?
thank you. No, thank you. Right?
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
prefer a Skype call.
I can take this. This is fine with me.
And now, having said that, obviously I have my opinion. I tend to agree with you more. I think that earliest is 2021. I mean,
Yeah.
and I'm being generous. And I think also what's going to happen is that a bunch of smaller ones are going to be the test pilots for medium-sized ones, and then those are going to be the test pilots for larger ones.
Right.
New York Comic Con, San Diego,
Sandy. Yeah.
going to be the last to come
Right.
back online, and it could take a year and a half to 2 years. And I'm not trying to alarm anybody because I do want to make this clear. Those who are watching, we will get through this as humanity.
Oh yeah.
This
For
isn't the end, and things will go back to normalcy. And I know that everybody's going to be upset in the fall for a different reason because football is most likely not going to be played. But we will cross that bridge as adults when we get to that point. But I digress right there. That's real problems in America. But anyhow. Now, having said all that, I do want to give you an opportunity because you run your website, you got your Kickstarter, you got your comic. Where can people find all of those things? Where can people support you on social media? What dates are important for people to put into their calendars who are watching, listening, analyzing, consuming this? You don't have smoke signals, so if that's how your method of communication is going, clearly you're on your own on that one. But beyond that,
Yeah.
promote yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can always find me at don'tforgetatowel.com. It's my geeky pop culture site. Outside of that, for the Kickstarter for the Hollowed specifically, it's dropping on May 28th. I'll be doing a Kickstarter live show on the 27th. I'm actually excited about it. We're gonna kind of treat it like a talk show in a way. So you can talk to me and interact with some other special guests for that. But then, so the Kickstarter will run for 30 days. You could follow me on Twitter at Chaz Voltaire. I'll usually do updates on that. And then the Don't Forget a Towel Instagram page will also do updates for Hollowed as well. But I'm on social media. You can totally find me. And if you need to get some comics, you can totally hunt me down. Or if you just want to talk geeky stuff and then share your thoughts about, everything, I'm also around. And we have resources like you, which is great, so that you get a voice to these independent people who are trying to talk about their stuff. And this is fantastic. This is why I have faith in humanity, to be quite honest with you, is because we come up with ingenuity ways to like still talk to people, still feel connected, and it's fantastic.
Well, I wish more people would come on, to be honest, because I'm going to jump off of that. I think that unfortunately, I wish more people would also do these. I
I might
created
have
this.
some names for you. Don't say that. I might be able to. I know a lot of these Kickstarter. That's how I found all these people. Is Kickstarters. I got a lot of friends through there.
That is good. That is good. I have five this week, so I'm completely booked. For those who are watching,
Yeah.
I have four more. I'm sorry, I have four more. You're my second, which would total the thing up to six. But I wish to go off of that and make it extremely clear. If you're a podcaster or you're somebody who likes doing this stuff, please join my group. It's Indie Comic Connect, and the goal of that is to connect podcasters with indie comic creators and other people. I actually just added a podcaster into the group who's looking for somebody,
Sweet.
and occasionally they're probably going to pull out of that group, which is really helpful.
Yep.
And so if that's what I really want. I want other people to do this, what I'm doing, and interviewing people like you. And we're building that out because I don't see that in any other Facebook group. And even going further with that, you know, talking about support, and definitely support the Kickstarter if you got the funds. Right now, if you don't have the funds, clearly you have to take care of your household first before
Yeah.
you go and take care of somebody else's or go have leisure. If you are having problems dealing with money because you lost your job, clearly deal with what you got to deal with first in your household. But if you have internet and electricity and a computer or a cell phone with internet access, like this lovely iPhone or an Android, if that is your preferred method, then clearly you can follow somebody on social media. You can follow his social media, and that is just as important as actually picking up the comic. Because if you go and retweet that Kickstarter, or you go share that Kickstarter on Facebook, and you have 500 friends, or you have 100 friends, somebody might check
The
it out,
greatest
look
thing.
at it, push it out there. Somebody might
Yeah.
follow Casey and definitely support it that way, as well as just shooting somebody a tweet saying, hey, really interesting comic. Looking forward to definitely seeing you at a con when everything gets better. Let me know what con you're in. Or if you're an interviewer and you want to interview him, even better, just shoot a tweet. That's how this sort of happened to some degree. On Facebook, it was just a comment and then one thing led to another. So support is not just economics. The social media aspect of it is just as important, if not more important, because the algorithms definitely, the more social media that occurs, the more it affects the algorithm. And that's the best thing that you can do as a person. So I recommend to everybody, definitely go out and support both if you can afford the economic side of it, and without a doubt, the social media side of it is just
For
as
sure.
important, if not more important.
Couldn't have said it better.